And that's what took us from, you know, a complete startup to a $100 million brand 10 years later. You need to maintain a really great product quality. There's those brands that rise and fall really quickly, especially in the social media age, because they just produce really subpar products, and a brand is sustained over a long period of time because they produce things that people want to come back and buy, and they build that trust with their community, and that's what we did at Frank. You know, we've gone from one SKU to now, you know, 30, 40 different SKUs, and people move across the SKUs and they come back and they purchase the things that they like. They're coming back to purchase us, and it creates that trust on the frankbody.com and then with all of the retail partners that we've gone with over time.
Just go and see the world and just show them what it really means to live life golden. Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden. They're about to see it shine, cause we're golden. They can't ever break us down, cause we're golden.
Hey guys, just before we head into the episode, if you have been enjoying the podcast, please make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you're using, whether you're using Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever it is that you're using. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button. It really does help us out a lot. It obviously means more people will be able to see and trust our content. It also means that you'll get that content every week, and you know, we really do appreciate all the support, all the shares, all the likes, all the comments, all the messages that we get. It does help us and spurs us on to keep providing more value and deliver, you know, quality content to you guys. So a massive thank you. Jess, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Really excited about this one. As I mentioned before, so you're the founder of Frank Bod and also Willow and Blake. Big fan of Willow and Blake's work from a business nut, you know, and someone who loves branding and how the depths you can go to, but also someone who seen Frank Bod from in its early days, you know, and how it became almost an it thing, you know, on social media at the point, and you know, now going back and doing my research now and just seeing how far it's actually come. I was saying to you before, like, I didn't realize, you know, that you know, because you kind of obviously see the brand and you see the brand grow, but you don't understand to the level that it goes to. But super excited for this one, and you know, really pumped to share the story and kind of talk the story, but also some of the lessons.
Yeah, I love sharing the lessons, so we can dive into all of that.
Yeah. We might start there. So I'd love to hear the startup story around Frank Bod, but also Willow and Blake as well, because I know Willow and Blake came first. So I'd love to dive into that to start.
Yeah, the story of Willow actually really sets the tone for how Frank Body came to be. So I am a copywriter by trade, and I started Willow and Blake with two of my best friends when I was maybe 22-ish. We started it as a blog. We just wanted a place to write. It just so happens that my two closest girlfriends at the time were also writers, and we wanted to tell, very much like what you're doing now, we wanted to tell the story of the people behind the idea. Podcast wasn't really a format then, so we were just doing written interviews. And it picked up a lot of traction. I think people really liked the kind of no BS approach to the way that we wrote, and it wasn't edited to within an inch of its life for advertisers. It was really just us telling the story we wanted to tell. And we were all dabbling in social and marketing and PR in our jobs, and started to integrate that into what we were doing at Willow and Blake. And Willow built up quite a reputation for itself, and we eventually turned it into a business about 2 years later, and it was a copywriting business. At the time, there were design agencies and press agencies, but nobody actually focusing on the written word, which in our opinion was such a key part of building a great brand or a great campaign. So we wanted to try and close this gap in the market. So we launched Willow and Blake, the copywriting agency, in our pajamas from our house, like absolutely no idea what we were doing.
Beautiful.
Maybe 23 years old. I think like you, when you launched your consulting business, you know, you're so young at the time and you don't know what you're doing. But I think that naivety kind of helped us.
You need it.
You need it. We had no preconceived notions of the way to run a business. We just sort of did what we thought was right and hit up all of our contacts and offered to do work for free. To really just build a folio and get our name out there. And we launched a campaign for a friend of ours who just imported 20,000 plastic shoes from China, which at the now you may know as the Jelly Bean sandal. So we helped relaunch that product, and that went absolutely bananas, and he sold out of all of the stock. And we thought, oh, we know what we're doing. We know how to do this. And decided to quit our jobs and focus on Willow and Blake full time. And that eventually grew into a full-service branding agency over the course of the next 12 years. So we do everything from entire brand development, naming, visual identity, all the way through to rollout and then campaign management for some really big clients throughout Australia and the US. We were doing that for a few years, and people came to us because they knew they were going to get a refreshing view and an out-of-the-box way of approaching how to create a brand and a voice that was really different to something that existed in a market. It's always been a big focus of Willow. The design is beautiful, but that message and voice is what's going to cut through, and we wanted to stand out from the crowd. And a lot of clients would come to us wanting to do that, and then when they saw it, they were a little bit scared, and it was starting to become a frustration point of ours. We knew we were creating great brands that then got watered down because you were dealing with someone who wasn't quite ready to commit to such a new and bold idea. And we thought, well, imagine what could we do if we just did this for ourselves? And at the time we were chatting with a couple of people about potentially producing something, a product in the health and wellness space, and using e-commerce and looking at how we could potentially market something through Instagram, because Instagram was brand new and there were no brands playing on there at the time. And all these sort of things came to a head. So we've got e-com, we've got social, we've got people who know how to do branding. How can we bring this together and create a product that we can launch? And that was where Frank Body was born. So one of my co-founders, Steve, we always joke that he likes to make money out of coffee every way he possibly can. He had some cafes at the time and, learned the different ways that people would come and ask to use the leftover grinds. They'd make body products with them at home, or they'd use it for garden fertilizer. And he kept coming back to this idea of the coffee scrub. And so we just basically made up a recipe with things that we had in the kitchen. And the product was really, really good. It acted like nothing that we had tried in the supermarket before, and there wasn't really a big focus on body care. It was all like natural body care. It was all that sort of fluff and gel and synthetic fragrances, and we could see a really big shift towards people caring about what they put on their body in the way that they did what they put in their body. So we launched this stuff that looked like dirt in a bag back in 2013 and created, what I think was quite a new and memorable brand and memorable voice, and had absolutely no idea what we were getting ourselves into. And now, a decade later, here we are with teams all over the world and no sleep and all that jazz. So that was how it started.
That is the epitome of a startup story, in my opinion. I kind of think about that and just think about, as I said, looking back now and kind of seeing it all happen, it's quite amazing. I want to come back to, I guess, Willow and Blake, because something that you mentioned, which I think can often be one of the things that stops people in their path when it comes to business. Like you guys talked about, you had a really great opportunity come to you guys around the jelly bean sandal, and obviously there's that naivety that we talked about, but I guess could you touch on what advice you would give to, say, founders or new business owners to taking that opportunity? Because I think that's the thing that I look at is like, we're getting opportunities come on our desk now, and I'm the same. I'm like, yep, let's do it, because I now know that that's how you've got to do it. You've got to just grab that opportunity and back yourself in, that no matter what happens, no matter how tough it gets, no matter how confused you are, you've got to really take it and back yourself in and really go for it. So what's your advice to someone that is maybe getting this opportunity and they might be passing it up, or, if that opportunity comes to them, what should they do, right? What do you think they should do?
Just stop thinking about it. Thinking kills opportunity. And it doesn't mean that you don't be prepared or have some kind of way of analysing risk. But the more you think about something, the more reasons you're going to come up with not to do it. And then you never take these opportunities when they arise. We didn't even think about it. We jumped at this opportunity, and we badgered him. We knew he'd imported all these shoes, and we thought, well, we can do this for you. Let us do this for you. We did it at such a cheap rate. Not to say that you shouldn't put value on what you do, but I think when you're really trying to start something, just remove as many barriers as you possibly can.
So
it's not about the version of the business that you want to exist in 10 years. It's about the version of the business that exists right now. And in our case, there was no business. It was literally an idea. We thought we might be able to do this for people. So the more practice that we got, the better we'd get at it, and we could build a reputation in market. So it's always my advice, like, just do the stuff. Just do it, take the opportunity. If it goes wrong, you're always going to learn something from it. In most cases, touch wood for everyone listening, like the world isn't going to blow up around you if it doesn't quite work out, and put some strategies in place that minimize the risk. Just get it done otherwise.
Yeah, 100%. I think what you mentioned around price as well, like I think especially early on, you need to do it for the experience, especially we can talk now about processes, systems and stuff like that, but when you're in those moments, you don't have that stuff. And the only way you can truly create that stuff, like you might be able to write out a process or, mind map a process, but you don't truly understand what can tear you down until you're in it, until you experience it. And I think that's really important. And especially initially, like it's the whole under promise, over deliver as well. Like I think that's a big thing when you first start, is like if you want to build a brand, like just go and crush it for someone, like when you get that opportunity, go all in, put everything you possibly can and just try to do the best job you possibly can.
That is exactly right. We live by the motto, under promise and over deliver. There are a lot of agencies out there that will just say yes to everything that comes their way, and we are not like that at Willow and Blake. We know our capabilities and we will only agree to things that we can actually do. I will never take someone's money and then try and problem solve it in the back end. I have such an ethical issue with people doing that. And so Willow still exists today. So, we have great opportunities that come our way and we have to decline them sometimes because we think that there might be people who are better subject matter experts and will refer our potential clients over there. So I think there's that element of like seizing the right opportunities when they come along as well, and don't dig yourself a hole that you're not going to be able to get out of. Yeah,
it's so true. It's so true. And there was just one other thing. I know that this is kind of maybe stalling it a little bit, but I think there was another really important topic that I'd love you to talk on is quitting your jobs, right? Because that is the age-old question. When do we quit? When, we've got a startup, we've got a side hustle. When do we quit? When do we take the step? When do we take the leap? You want to, I guess, maybe give us a little bit more on that? Because I know at the time, like, it sounds like you guys were quite young and it was like, and you can take those risks then, but was there a reason that you made the decision then and there? Like how did you kind of get to that decision?
Yeah, it's a really layered question, isn't it? Because it's so different depending on each individual circumstance. And the younger you are, generally, the less responsibility you have. Me now, with a mortgage and a family, it would be really different to just quit my job versus me 15 years ago. But if it makes anyone listening feel better, we had no savings and no clue. So I don't think there's necessarily a right time. For us, the conversation arose. We were all in this scenario where we were working for small businesses, working quite close to the founders and learning a lot from them. And each of us kind of coming to the realization at different points in time that we didn't want to work for those people anymore. We wanted to be them. They almost did their job too well of inspiring us. And we thought, wow, that's great. I don't want to work for you anymore. I want to go do my own thing. So we wrapped up some projects that we were working on and quit our jobs, and we didn't really have anything in place. We knew that if shit really hit the fan, we could go and get another job. And even if that job was not in our field that we loved, anything to pay the bills. But there was an element of so much was on the line because there was no money in the bank and we had rent coming up later that month. Well, mate, you got to hustle and make this work or you're not going to be able to eat or pay your rent. So I kind of liked that hunger and not having such a safety net because it made us work really, really hard to achieve what we did. And we had no funding and, we were really lucky. We had supportive families, but none of us were taking any money or anything like that from our families. I'm sure they wouldn't have let us end up on the street, but it was really up to us to achieve what we wanted. So there's no right time to quit other than now.
Yeah, and that's so true. I actually just went through that, my partner did. So we've been together for 5 or 6 years, and she's come up through digital marketing and worked at a really successful company, helped them grow, was the head of their marketing department. And, it was kind of like this decision of okay, when we knew what we wanted to do, we knew we have this business. We're also started a media agency. So similar thing, wanting to get into branding and production as well, and kind of creating this solution just around content because that's what we do really well. And, you know, like her expertise, where I've come from, our network, it kind of just seemed like a great idea at the time. And it was like, okay, well, you know, we're probably going to have kids soon. We're probably going to get married soon. And there's probably going to be all these things coming up. It's like, well, if not now, then when?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was kind of like, okay, same thing. Like we cut our household income, you know, from the wage I pay myself out of the company to her wage, and, you know, down by like nearly 80 grand a year.
Yeah.
Right. So like right now we're in that moment, you know, we're working extremely hard, but we're doing it because we don't really have a choice. But we also don't have the responsibilities that we know are going to come in the future just yet. So I think that was really, you know, you put it really well of like, it's up to the individual to, I guess, make analysis on their situation and say, okay, like, you know, am I in a position to do this? Is this the right time? And I know we say, you know, you just said it, like the time is now, like it's always now, unless you do have, say, some other responsibilities like children and a partner and these kind of things to think about. So that's a really good point, because I feel like that's something that's not talked about a lot. So we'll dive back into the story now. So I'd love to hear about the start of Frank Bod, and obviously you guys have created the product. We might even go into like, what were some of the things that you guys did early on that had a massive impact on growth? You know, like what were some of the initial things maybe in the first 3 years that were like, oh, this is what we need to go, you know, we need to kind of lean into?
Yeah, there's a couple of key things. I always separate it into brand and product. So when I talk about brand, it's a really different landscape now. So we launched nearly 10 years ago, and our major competitors then were the big legacy brands, you know, all the brands sitting under L'Oreal, Estee Lauder, you know, those types of conglomerates.
Because e-com wasn't a thing then, was it?
E-com wasn't really a thing. I mean, there were still people around. Adore Beauty existed then, and they do an absolutely fantastic job. But we couldn't identify very many brands that were created for a youth audience by the people who were actually going to be using the product. You know, most of the beauty brands that I used were owned by 60-year-old white men who, sorry, but they don't know what it's like to be a 25-year-old woman.
Yeah.
So we wanted to cut through a lot of the crap and a lot of the jargon that dominated the industry. So producing a brand that people could actually emotionally connect with, and there was a community around the brand, and we wanted to create a product that people actually wanted to talk about and share, and that, you know, that virality didn't exist in the beauty landscape. People were not taking photos of their beauty products and sharing them online. This was something that we and a handful of other startups at the time created. For us, it made sense. We were going to use Instagram because we had no money to market anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to come into this platform. We're not going to talk like a corporate company. We're going to talk like your friend. And that's where the character of Frank came from, because he was playing in a space that was dominated by peer-to-peer communication. So you've got the character of Frank, you've got the product, and now we need to kind of build a way of getting people to talk about the product. So that was very manufactured. There was an element of luck that people took it up, but we really encouraged that. So myself and Eri and Brie were taking photos of our legs covered in coffee scrub all the time to try and start showing the behavior that we wanted our consumers to emulate. And then with every product that was sold, a flyer went out, literally step by step instructioning people how to take a selfie and put it online, because now, commonplace. 10 years ago, you just didn't do it.
No.
So it was really purposeful. We knew that word of mouth was going to be what built our brand, and you can't just expect word of mouth to happen. Word of mouth is generally manufactured, and then once it sort of gets going, the steamroll effect happens and it builds on itself. So that was a huge component of what made us successful. And the other one is a product that actually worked. I'm a big believer in, you know, you need to maintain a really great product quality. There's those brands that rise and fall really quickly, especially in the social media age, because they just produce really subpar products, and a brand is sustained over a long period of time because they produce things that people want to come back and buy, and they build that trust with their community, and that's what we did at Frank. You know, we've gone from one SKU to now, you know, 30, 40 different SKUs, and people move across the SKUs and they come back and they purchase the things that they like, and that's what took us from, you know, a complete startup to $100 million brand 10 years later, because they're coming back to purchase us, and it creates that trust on the frankbody.com, and then with all of the retail partners that we've gone with over time. The third one I would say was looking at our weaknesses. So for us, the biggest weakness that we could see was that we could be one of those fad brands. We knew we had a great community and a great product, but we were seeing so many companies rise and fall. So the way to try and mitigate that was to partner with really, really credible people in the beauty space. So that was why we launched in Mecca in Australia. It wasn't necessarily about growing sales. It was about looking at our brand equity. You know, we didn't want to be an Instagram brand, and that was the conversation driving a lot of these type of interviews. They were talking to me a lot about our social media strategy, and it kept dawning on me. I'm like, we're not a content brand, we're not a social media brand, we are a beauty brand, but people keep wanting to talk about social rather than the product. So we've got to correct this. Yes, that's great because we are really good at what we do from a content lens and on social, but that's not what actually we are. So how do we get people to see us differently? Particularly, you know, in the eyes of the media here in Australia, we could see that they were not necessarily taking us seriously for our core product and our core business model. So moving into places like Mecca were very strategic to not only drive business growth, but really change the way people perceived the brand and sort of leave the Instagram brand story behind and in the past. And I think we did that successfully.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and it makes a lot of sense. Like I'm pretty lucky that I get to talk to a lot of different brands, and I think that brand equity piece is it's a big piece to the puzzle, I think, that sits between startup and scale, right? Because that's the pattern that I'm recognizing, you know, even just from this conversation and tying a few other things together, but it does sit between startup and scale because you have to earn the respect beyond just the social media side of it. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is you can leverage other brands and connect with other brands through association. And that can kind of, I'll use an example like Harley from South Street, you know, having a shop in Chadstone, you know, like there's a reason she chose Chadstone, if that makes sense. And that's kind of like I see a lot of that happening now. She just did Paris Fashion Week and so on. And it kind of resonates with some of the stuff that you're saying of like, oh, we've had this initial success and a lot of that is around getting attention, but now we need respect.
Exactly.
And we need to change the kind of perception or the association that, you know, the customer has around our brand. So I think that's really, really interesting. I want to come back to the first point around, you mentioned emotion and really trying to be able to create a connection and a community with your customer. And obviously something that sticks out is the tone of voice and some of the stuff that you guys did early on. Are you able to dive into that, I guess? And because I feel like branding can often just get caught in the weeds with design. And you mentioned that earlier. And I guess talk about how you guys started to weave. What were some of the tactics and strategies you used to create that emotional response, not just that visual response?
Yeah, so when you think about the products that we create at Frank Body, you know, they're products you use in the bathroom, predominantly in the shower, and most people are naked when they shower. And they're products that you're putting all over your body. It's one of the most intimate experiences you can actually have with a brand. And if you just break it down and think about the situation that people are using your products in, it baffles me that it wasn't already part of the vernacular within the beauty industry to talk to people in the way that we do and acknowledge the fact that they're in one of their most vulnerable states when they're using their product. And for a lot of women, unfortunately, they are trying to combat some kind of perceived wrongness with their body, you know, that they're not happy with something. And it was very cold and very corporate, the whole space that we were dealing with. And I was feeling disconnected from all of the products that I was buying. And I thought, well, if I'm feeling this way, the chances are most other women or most other consumers of our product are feeling this way too. So can we bring a little bit of fun and a little bit of warmth into this space? And that was where that cheeky character came from. You know, there's a lot of innuendo in the Frank Body brand, but for good reason, because you are naked, as I said, when you're using the product. It's not like I'm trying to sell you a car or a Chico roll with a naked woman sprawled across the front of the bonnet. You know, that's completely unnecessary
Yeah.
sexualized marketing. This is about empowering the woman who is predominantly our customer and making her feel liberated and seen, because we're always desexualized as women, and there was always so much shame around that. And you would have seen this over the last 10 years, that space has just opened up much for healthy conversation. The conversations we always have with our girlfriends are now actually taking place front and center, and it's just as it should be. But it needed the customer to come along and actually be the people in charge of the brand for that to change. And we knew that it was working because our customers were emulating the tone of voice and the content online. So we thought, this is really resonating with them. It's what they want to see from the brands that are becoming part of their life. And, we choose products and we choose brands because they represent a part of us that we want to show to the world. So every part of what you're wearing and what I'm wearing is building the identity that I want other people to see me as. And it's no different to the things that we curate in the rest of our lives. And social was allowing people to, showcase that. And so for us, building a brand that they were really proud to be the part of the community of and then talk to other people about just made so much personal sense and so much business sense.
I think it really talks to the fact that like a niche is not necessarily demographics, but actually more psychology.
Yeah.
You can identify demographics, and that's an element of niche, but what's really important is understanding the psyche and the psychology, and then transferring that across to like brand building and, trying to identify what's the, even product as well, like what's the core reason that our product actually exists, not necessarily because we're trying to exfoliate or improve our skin, but actually what does it mean on a psychological level, and then how that feeds into branding and some of the things that you talked about, like tone of voice, like the way you talk to your customer. And I think, you guys were just obviously really, really good at identifying all that stuff from the beginning, obviously because it was your skill set and you'd done a lot of work in that area. But I think that's a huge lesson and takeaway for the listener at home, to not just think about what their feed looks like and all this, the kind of visual stuff, but actually the emotional and the psychology and really understanding the customer. I guess just a quick one, like, what kind of research did you do around customer back then? Like, because obviously, was there research? Was it like, were you kind of collecting information? Were you more just talking to customers? Like, how did you kind of come to that point, or was it just something that you guys were able to identify based on everything that was happening around you?
More the latter. Having had Willow and Blake for a few years at that point, it was just ongoing field research. We were seeing this in passing, and we were kind of building up a bit of a profile of what this customer was looking for. And with Frank in particular, we were the customer. So we knew her inside out. And we had 3 different versions at the helm of the company. So that helped. But beyond launch, it became very much about that ongoing collection of data from our customers. So that's always happening through, qual and different types of research. And it might be that our CS team are literally on the phone to customers, asking them why they haven't come back to purchase in 90 days, or they're completing a quiz for us. So it's just never resting on your laurels and thinking that you know the customer inside out is the key to success.
Yeah, and something you mentioned then is like, it's, obviously there's channels to get that information, like surveys and the real obvious stuff, but it sounds like you guys actually looked at things beyond that, like data points and kind of looked at the company and the business and actually started to, I guess, make analysis on some of the data points that you already had there, right? Like, it's not necessarily just reaching out to the customer and having conversations, and that's the start of it. Like, that's really important, but there's also stuff going on within your business that you can look at from a data perspective that will give you more information than what you need. And I feel like we often just revert to surveys and this kind of stuff, and although that's important, you can read between the lines a little bit with some of the stuff that's going on internally and do some really internal analysis and get some really good insights there as well.
Yes. Never ever rely on customer surveys to make a decision, because people always answer questions in the way that they would like to be seen as opposed to the way that they actually are. So we measure against, especially if you're working in e-com, there are so many data points that you're gathering on an hourly basis. You can build a really comprehensive customer profile through that, and then look at that alongside the answers that you get from things like surveys with your customers, and you'll find somewhere in the middle is the actual answer. Now, like when we're working on clients at Willow and Blake, there is a lot of research that goes into building our customer profiles and our strategies, but we also still like to take a no bullshit approach. There's a lot of agencies out there that will build you brand triangles upon brand triangles that are completely useless and so full of, egotistical one-liners from some strategist somewhere, and it's just not the way that we work. We really deliberately chose the people that work at Willow and Blake because they are such great creative and strategic thinkers, but they take a no bullshit approach to what they do, and they're going to actually come up with something very simple and straightforward that's very effective that the clients can then take and run with, rather than they look back at this document 3 years later and don't understand what it was that we were talking about at the time. So I think for as much data as you can collect, sometimes the most obvious answer is the right one.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And I think you realize that, once you do the surveys and you look at the answers and you do that stuff. And I think it also talks to the fact of, potentially what we'll talk about is scaling a business as well. And you just mentioned it, the ability to think deeply about something, but create something simple and effective. I think that's the true essence of someone who is creative, is they can take this really complicated thing that's a business and create this really simple and effective strategy. And I think that's really the goal, is we've got this big mumbled up thing over here, and then we just want to layer it out. This is what we do. This is who we are. This is what we represent.
Yeah.
But I want to come back to scaling. Mm-hmm. Okay, because that's going to, I think there's a few things that I picked up on that I find really interesting, and it sounds like you guys did a lot of cross-selling in the business to kind of maybe explore and experiment and again, I guess, get more of those data points, and you focused heavily on repeat purchase as well, and trying to build that relationship to the customer where they keep coming back. It's not that one purchase. And I think inevitably that is what scales a business, is how do we get customers that kind of keep coming back to us? Because people don't, I think this is the one thing that I've realized with brands, is that we don't make decisions on the best brand, we make decisions on the least disastrous, and that's why we keep going back to them, and we all buy from 3 or 4 companies, if we were to look at our purchases, I reckon 70 to 80% would come from the same 3 or 4 businesses. So I'd love for you to, I guess, touch more on what took Frank and even, Willow and Blake, because I feel like there's a heavy connection in the thought process, right? Obviously you've got Willow and Blake, which is an agency, and you guys focus heavily on getting the right people on the bus. But then also, because that's a big part of scaling, but also talk about, how you guys expanded product and how you basically took Frank Bod from, this initial product, this thing that obviously took off, and how it expanded beyond that. Yeah,
it's really so different scaling an agency and a product business. So I'm glad that you asked that question. At Willow and Blake, it was a very slow process to scale, and it took the back seat to Frank Body for a long time, if I'm being perfectly honest. Mm-hmm. And acknowledging that it was taking the back seat was the number one step to being able to scale properly. So we brought on a new partner who acted as general manager and business development manager, and he was such a champion for the brand when we couldn't always be there. Now we've found a much better split between how we divide our time between the companies. So he was key to then nurturing the talent, and the talent are what make Willow and Blake what it is. They're such great brand thinkers, and being very particular with the type of clients that we wanted to work with. We don't work with everyone and anyone. We work specifically with startup brands, and a lot of the time in the DTC space, and challenger brands. So brands that really want to push the envelope and do something different to what their competitors are doing. That's our niche. It's still a really big niche. We work with those type of companies all over the world, but I'm not going to sit here and just produce some crappy run-of-the-mill advertising campaign that any other agency would do. We want to produce things that are really interesting and thought-provoking, and we want to work with clients that do that. So, being very deliberate and distinctive in who we want to work with was the key to scale, and then putting the right people in place to do that. At Frank, oh God.
I feel like this would have been an absolute, just a roller coaster.
Yeah, roller coaster as well, because I was just about to say there's nothing linear about the way that Frank scaled.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump all over the place here. Product was key. So we launched with the original coffee scrub, and it is a fantastic product, but it's not a grudge purchase by any means. No one needs to use a coffee scrub every single day. So it's one of those things that they'd buy and kind of dabble with a little bit. So we wanted to create a routine that was very much part of her daily beauty routine. So, cleansers and moisturizers and things that we all do every single day, deodorants, body washes. So we built that product portfolio out over the course of a decade. And then part of the strategy was, okay, we've got the product. Now, where is she shopping for that product? I'm not just going to keep shoving a square peg in a round hole. She's not necessarily buying her deodorant and her body wash online. She's probably buying them in a retail setting as she remembers that she's about to run out of something like that. Okay, so let's put that product in front of her where she's shopping for it. And we call that our go-to-her strategy. So we expanded into brick and mortar retail throughout the world, and we were really deliberate with the type of retailers that we chose. It wasn't just about driving volume. It was about putting the right product in the right place at the right time for the customer. Accepting that growth goes like this, squiggling my fingers up and down if you're only listening to the audio. It's
Can I jump in and touch on that? Because I feel like there's a massive point there that, and you mentioned it, not trying to, was it square through circle hole or the other way around?
Either way, it's bad.
But the go-to-her strategy, because I feel like I look back at that and I think about it now and I go, that's amazing, because most companies think, let's just get more traffic. Let's expand our product range. We'll sell it in. We'll go through the same channel. It's going to work. We're going to do this, right? But you guys actually go, no. And I'd be interested to hear, did you try that at the start and then you found it didn't work? Or was it just simply, hey, we're going to think a little bit deeper here and actually go, well, if we're going to expand, we have to get the right marketing channel or get the product in the right area. Because I feel like that's something that will be really helpful for someone who probably has a product right now. They might maybe thinking about their second or third or expanding.
It was a combination of, we were already thinking about it because, I think a key to a healthy business is decentralizing risk. So if you've got all of your sales coming from a single channel, what happens if something goes wrong there? You're up a very bad creek.
Yep.
Then we were predominantly marketing through Instagram, and we're using a lot of, basic performance marketing to attract our customer to frankbody.com. And we went through the huge algorithm change that everybody experienced, and it changed our business fundamentally. We went from extremely affordable marketing through that channel to extremely expensive, and we found the targeting a lot more difficult. And working with influencers became a lot more expensive. Basically, all of the cogs that had been driving our marketing machine now were getting stuck. And so we had to completely rethink the way that we introduced our brand to people and, look at how we could potentially be operating in a different way that wasn't so much like pushing shit uphill, which is what it felt like to be in performance marketing at the time. So we always find that it's not necessarily that it's full steam ahead with every channel. There's kind of that, one channel starts to creep ahead. It's very much driven by macro factors in the world, and that will start to pull back and the other one takes place. For the last 2 years, we saw all of our .coms absolutely boom, and we'd just gone into so many huge retail settings that were closed for the better part of 2 years, and that completely de-accelerated those channels. And now the world's opened up again, so we see .com pulling back, and our retail partners like Ulta and Target in the US driving forward. And there's such a big element of managing expectations, especially at a board level, if you get to that point where you're reporting down year on year, but then the commentary around that is so important because, well, of course, .com's down because all the shops have opened up again and people want to go out into the real world and spend their money on that. So looking at growth I find it so interesting and so complex because it's so layered and you can't control the outcome. All you can do is pull a couple of levers and see what the result is.
How much do you think having the right people on the bus then plays a factor in all of that, right? Because you guys obviously, from just the language you're using, you really care about that, and having, firstly at Willow and Blake, but I'm assuming it's the same at Frank, going, we're going to go through these kind of algorithm changes or, pandemics, and there's a lot of that stuff happening, but you guys are obviously still progressing forward and think very deeply around those layers. Obviously, a big part of that is getting the right people on the bus. These, I'm assuming for you guys, it's like deep thinkers, creative, these kind of people. How much do you think that plays a role or has played a role in your ability to kind of get to where you are right now?
A huge role, and I shouldn't have overlooked that before. We started with a couple of co-founders who had to be jack of all trades, and we did everything because that's what you do when you start a business. You don't really have money a lot of the time to employ people, so you just get everything done yourself. And then you slowly start to hire people who are better at doing those things than you. We're in a very fortunate position now, 10 years later, where we've got a great heads of department structure who are amazing leaders and also extremely high performers, which is, the ultimate combination to find. But I was listening to something the other day that my husband showed me. It was a Simon Sinek video, and he was talking about...
He's the man, isn't he?
Everyone loves Simon Sinek. I'm a bit... pick and choose when I like to listen to what he has to say. But this I found really interesting because he was talking about the way that they were choosing, people for extreme... I'm trying to remember what section of the army it was. I can't remember, but basically like death missions.
Oh, yeah.
How they're going on them, and how do you choose who's going to be on those missions with you and who's going to lead them. And he was looking at performance and trust on a chart, and how you'd always choose the person who's got a lot of trust and might be a lower performer, and they're the people that you're going to build a really great team with. So it's not always about choosing the best of the best when it comes to skills, but choosing people that are always going to be there in the trenches with the rest of the team, who are very much about seeing other people flourish and succeed, and there's no competitiveness. It'd be really easy in a business like ours where you've got retail sales and .com sales for there to be so much competitive tension there, but we've spent a lot of time cultivating a approach that is very much about a rising tide lifts all boats and everyone succeeds together. And so they're sharing their knowledge and their wins, and they are all in it together, no matter what part of the business that they work for. And it's taken us a long time to get there.
Oh, of course. It's such a process, I would imagine. It's really interesting you say that. So I don't know if you've read the book Good to Great, Jim Collins.
I've read bits and pieces of it, yeah.
So one of the principles in that is first who, then what. And that was obviously Good to Great is about companies that obviously there's companies out there that become good, but what makes the great companies great is he kind of penciled it down to 5 factors, and the first one is first who, then what. So get the right people on the bus, and then you end up together figuring out how you get the bus to where it needs to go. And that kind of factors into what you're just saying then. I read, that book is something I read once a year, and I love it. But yeah, that definitely resonates with what you were just saying just then.
It's so important. You need to create a culture where the people that you then put on the bus are allowed to tell you where to drive, if we're going to go with this analogy, because there's a lot of business leaders that don't want to hear when they're doing something wrong. And I hope that we've created a workplace where, I see it all the time. We sit in our heads of department meeting with the founders and our senior leadership, and we laugh because they'll call us out on things that we're doing wrong all the time, or where we're holding up projects. And yes, there's hierarchy. There has to be hierarchy for the business to work properly, but there's also very little ego. So I'm a big believer in just owning when you're stuffing things up. Like if I'm holding up a project, I'm going to own that and put my hand up and say I'm the reason that this hasn't hit its deadline, and give my staff the ability to say that as well, rather than creating this workplace where things have to happen in secret by the water cooler.
Yeah, it's so the genius with 1,000 helpers. Like it's kind of like you don't want to build your business that way.
No.
Because that's always the roadblock. That's always the thing that stops you. No matter where you're getting to, if the company relies on a centralized person or kind of team or whatever it is, it's always going to be the thing that is this. That's always going to create the ceiling. So I think it does truly talk to that as well. And even just something, working with my partner has really showed me that, because it's good. Like, I'm just like, she's not afraid to tell me what when I'm holding things up. But I think having a team there where everybody feels comfortable enough, like that's a culture thing, but also, people that are willing to drive the bus. I think that's really important. And it kind of comes back to that hiring process of getting the right people first. Yeah. So, cool. This is a bit of a different question, but I'm really interested. This is a personal one for me. So I thought about this, and I'm like, okay, this is what I want to know, that I think will create a lot of value too. If you were to start if you were going to launch a product now, what's the process you go through? So let's say blank canvas, brand new product. What's the process that you go through of, or kind of getting that product to a successful launch?
Brand new product or brand new brand?
I think let's go with product, because more so from that kind of branding side though, or even like actually...
Yeah, because it's really different, because we launch new products all the time at Frank, and so I'd tell you the way I do that. But if I was starting a new
Let's do brand. I think that'll get us the better answer.
Hard one.
Yeah.
If I was launching a new brand, the number one thing I would not do is what I did with Frank Body. Because it wouldn't work. And because it's a different market 10 years later, and I have so many clients and friends and, entrepreneurs that ask me questions and they try to emulate what they've seen with other brands. It's never going to work. Wrong place, wrong time, different place, different time. It doesn't need to be complicated. I think launching a brand or a product, if you just need to look at how you fit into the cultural zeitgeist. What is going on right now? What is a trend right now or a need right now that I can be tapping into and creating a product that solves that need and a content strategy that talks about it. It might feel easy to me because it's what I do every single day. And if it's not what you do, then work with experts to help you look at how you bring that to life. But that's what I would be doing. So I wouldn't be trying to launch a brand on Instagram. It's done, dead, finished a couple of times.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. I agree. But keep going. Sorry.
No. I mean, it's really the crux of it. It's because there's no formula, right? I can't sit here and be like, I do X, Y, Z, because it's so dependent on what I'm launching to what consumer, in what industry, in what region. But I would be looking at the platform that's relevant now to the customer that I'm talking to, or what's going to be relevant, and it might be quiet for a while and then start to boom. So... And just don't expect instant success. Like, people look at Frank and go, oh my God, it was overnight. It wasn't overnight. It was the culmination of my entire career and the entire career and knowledge of a couple of other people as well. So it was many, many years in the making, even if then the product that we launched, we were only working on for 6 or 12 months.
It's never an overnight success, is it?
I hate that term so much.
Yeah.
Not because it sets people up for failure because they think that they're supposed to go from 0 to 100 overnight, and it's physically impossible. So work with experts where you can, because it can be expensive, but spend your money on the right things, and then just don't try and copy what somebody else has done.
I really love what you said around cultural and trends. I think that's what makes a great entrepreneur. They know. They're able to read the play in a sense, and kind of keep an eye on the trends and what's culturally a fit. Definitely, like that's, market dynamics always trump product, and it's like almost like a tsunami, right? Like, you're never going to beat the market, but if you can learn to leverage it, you can, like something I always say is you can have like you can have a great product, but if it's not culturally a fit, or it's a dying market, it's not going to do as well as, say, not a mediocre product, because you've got to always have a good product and a great product, but like a product that's, let's say, more relevant will always do better. So I think that's how I think of it in terms of I guess looking at something new. Like even with this, we were like, okay, do we think podcasting is going to be around for a long time? And it's almost like that new form of owned media.
Yep.
And we think there's massive opportunity there. And that's why it was like, cool, this is where we go. we put ourselves in there, we get the right team in there, and we just figure it out. But if we're in the right market and it's going to, it's going to be culturally relevant for the next 10 years, we're in. Exactly. You know what I mean? So it's awesome. Cool. So let's talk about branding now and building a brand. What do you see that's working? Like, because you said it perfectly before. It's like what worked 10 years ago is not going to work now. So, tapping into your marvelous business mind, what do you think is working now? And what, how has it changed? How is it changing currently?
Okay.
Big question.
Big question, like broad answer too. I'm trying to work out how to streamline this. I see a couple of different trends going on at the moment. Consumers they're a lot more conscious and a lot more expecting of brands now than they were even 5 years ago. So there's things that were once nice to haves that are just absolute mandatories now. We need to have an inclusivity policy. We need to have a sustainability policy. They're not pillars to build your brand on anymore. That's just basic stuff that everybody needs to be doing. So the biggest question we ask is, how do you then stand out when the things that once made you stand out are now just par for the course, and everybody needs to be doing them? That's the question that we're constantly trying to answer for our clients. So if that was something that you built a brand on, looking at how you continue to evolve and continue to grow is really, really key. And that's been a big part of our journey at Frank. We built a brand that was natural and sustainable, and now
that's
inclusive. That's everybody. It's just, and which is fantastic, because you obviously want to be part of the cohort that leads that change, and it's awesome to see. But now everyone looks like us. So how do we stand out, and that's our constant challenge. What do we do next that is core to who we are as a brand? And these are the questions everybody should be asking, but that's going to separate us from what everybody else is doing. So that's probably the biggest question I think brands need to be answering, and that's how you build something that people can love.
It's so true, right? Like relevance and differentiation are just like the two key pillars. And then it's almost like, okay, is what's relevant and what's going to be relevant over the next 10 years? Is it differentiated? Is it going to make us stand out? And then can we sustain this? Yeah. Is this strategy actually sustainable long term, or even, over the next, say, 2 years? Because it does change really quickly, but I definitely think that's something that I pay attention to, I guess. Like in my mind, I'm like, they're kind of like the three, I guess, hurdles or three kind of things that I look at, and I'm like, we've got to, if this is the strategy we're going to go with, it has to jump these three hurdles. Yeah. So I think that was very lovely put. So I guess, how are you, the last thing we want to touch on before we go to Quickfire is, how are you guys thinking about expansion from here on in? Because, I don't take you as someone who is looking to stop anytime soon, and you obviously, are going to keep moving forward. So how are you guys looking to expand, and what do you think's next, and how are you guys planning to, not in detail, but how are you guys looking at the future for Frank?
It's a great question. I like that. At Frank, we've got two core parts of our business, which is our .com and retail, and they both need to continue to grow for scale to be happening. Yeah. So there's an element of looking at what we can be doing within the regions that we already exist in. Do we go into new retail settings with a really curated range of products, for example? Is pharmacy or supermarket ever going to be right for us as a brand? Do we be expanding into new regions that we're not playing in, and do we bring on experts to be leading that for us, instead of trying to hold everything within our team or our offices here in Australia and the US and the UK? So they're the kind of questions we're always asking ourselves. None of us have any aspiration to be a 100 SKU brand, and I don't think newness is the way to sustain growth. It gives you spikes, but really great brands continue to be really great brands because people are always buying into the core SKUs, and so that's a huge focus for us. How do we continue to grow the stuff that's been, part of the range for many, many years already, and how do we keep people excited about that rather than just adding complexity and costs, because it's really expensive to launch a new product. So if that becomes how you as a brand, you're growing, it's really dangerous territory to be in. if you ask me anyway. The shiny carrot syndrome, I think, is a real thing. So growth is not necessarily sexy. It's very much going back to basics and looking at what's working and how we, what our weak spots are. So, for example, I'm taking us through a big focus on regulatory claims at the moment because we are really, really, really play by the rules when it comes to what we can and can't say about the product. And then we see competitors going through clinical trials that can say so much more than us. And I'm like, well, this is a gap. How can I ever compete against a product that can say explicitly, I will do X, and then I have to say, maybe I will do X, Y, Z, but I can't really commit to anything because I haven't gone through a clinical trial. There's a huge discrepancy in what we can achieve when we look at our competitors in such a blank way. So we're always looking for the weak spots within the business and how we can turn them into strengths in order to grow. So that's kind of what we're doing.
It's really cool. I mean, it's good. I think again, the insight into looking at how you guys grow is really fascinating in a sense because I think from what I can see, you guys are really good at pattern recognition and going and really deep analysis internal and looking internally to see where that next opportunity is. So I think that's a great lesson for all the founders at home.
Thanks. Yeah, I it's so different in every level of the business too. You have your team who are mostly focused on making what is working work even harder, and then it becomes your job as a founder or a senior leader to find the white space and give them their next project to be working on. And you're not always the one that gets to, have the glory at the end of the day, but you're creating that opportunity for your team to run with. Yeah,
that's such a good point that I'd love for you to just maybe touch on a little bit further around team, because the different roles and I guess structure, because obviously, and you just mentioned it then, but I always think about whenever you're obviously bringing something new into your business, whether it's a product or it's a marketing campaign or whatever it is, not necessarily a campaign, but you're always looking to sustain whatever is working, right? So you want to bring something in and then you want to sustain that. And almost your role as the founder or the visionary is to go out, and even leadership at times is to go out and okay, what's that next kind of opportunity that we want to kind of go? And then that, again, moves into that sustainability part. Is that how you guys look at it from I guess a growth standpoint?
Very much so. So all the founders now play a C-suite role and will manage our departments with our head of department as our 2IC. And there's an element of, day-to-day maintenance of the business. That's part and parcel of running it. But our job at the end of the day, for myself as CMO, is to be looking at where are there sales and marketing opportunities for us that we are currently not playing in, and what can I be spending my day learning about today that I can then help inform my team on, which then grows into an entire project, which hopefully has XYZ benefits for us.
Yeah, and they go away and execute and get it done.
Yeah, you're not necessarily the executor anymore. Sometimes I'll try and do things to keep it off their plate. I don't always like to be that leader that's just
do this,
handballing stuff to them. But you need to find that balance of how much do you do to then be able to hand something over to your team and set them up for success. And then they really kind of own that project through the execution phase.
Yeah, amazing. Awesome. Quickfire, we are ready to rock and roll. So as we mentioned before, it's these questions are quite broad. So it's more you be you, answer how you want to. Everyone gets scared. You will love it. Okay, so one piece of advice for your younger self.
I always give myself the same piece of advice. It came from my grandpa. You are worth whatever price you put on yourself. Essentially, it means so many different things to me. It's not necessarily about monetary value. It's your worth in so many different ways, and to stand up for what you believe in, and to fight for what you think is right, and to make sure you are heard. And then if you don't do any of those things, you can't be frustrated later when the outcome wasn't what you wanted. If you want a certain outcome, you have to make it happen.
That's so powerful. I don't have anything to add to that. That's just, I think that's so important for everyone. Forget business, just in general, relationships, everything, it's just so pivotal. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting a business?
work harder now than you ever will in your life, and you're going to give up a lot to be able to do it. But if you're having those days where you're wondering whether it's worth it or not, I promise you that it is. And you're only ever going to regret the things that you didn't do. So just kind of keep pushing and ask questions. There are no dumb questions. I love when people ask for advice from me, or I ask them for advice, because the moment you think that you know everything is when you're going to fail.
Amen. That's so true. Okay, so what advice do you have for women that are currently in business, specifically women?
You're probably going to have to say things 100 times for people to hear you, and that's okay. Or you'll give an idea and people will not acknowledge it, and then a week later a man will say the same idea and they'll be like, that was a great idea, Bob. I think we are in a really interesting time to be women in business, because we are one of the first generations to be able to be in the positions that we're in, which is fantastic. But we're also one of the first generations who are trying to have it all, and it's incredibly difficult. There is no model for how you be a business owner or a successful person, even if you're not the founder, and how you manage your personal life and how you manage motherhood. There is no handbook for that, and no one has really done it before our generation. And we are the 24/7 generation, and it is exhausting. So there's so much pressure on women today, more so than I think there ever has been. It's always been different types of pressure, but now we are the have-it-all generation. We have it all plus exhaustion. So it's not necessarily a piece of advice. It's more just acknowledgement that this is where we are right now, but I prefer this than the alternative.
So what can men do for women in business? Because this is like, that's something I really care about. My partner, she's with me in this, and on a personal level, but for our audience as well, like, what can men do for women in business? Like, because we are going through change at the moment, and it's great, and we're not anywhere near where we need to be, with equality and equal opportunity and these kind of things. But what can men do for women in business generally? Because I'll just preface that, because I feel like we don't necessarily, we are different, we are different in the way we think, right?
Yeah.
So it's more like, how can we start to create, like, what do we need to become aware of?
All right, I'm going to answer this really honestly, and
please
don't take offense to this.
Not at all. Like, this is why I'm asking the question, because I really care about it.
The answer to the question is to answer that question yourself. So
I'm
a big believer in the mental load is a real thing, and a lot of how we're trying to progress women now is by women solving that problem. And I don't want to solve the problem for you, and I know your intentions are completely pure, and my husband asks me the same question. Just fucking solve it yourself, Dad. I think it's true of any of us in a position of power. I am still then a very privileged white person, so then I'm in the position where I need to be educating myself about what other people who, are other minorities or, different race to me, differently abled, they don't have the same privileges that I do. And it's a really awful reality of the world. So everyone, not everyone, but a lot of us have our own privilege that we need to understand and educate ourselves on, and then learn how we play a role in the cycle that continues to be perpetuated and change it, rather than sort of asking the question. You know what I mean? It's
of course
education and just listening, I think, is really good. So in one hand I'm saying don't ask the question, but on the other hand you need to ask the question to hear about people's experiences to then take away and learn something from it. Yeah,
exactly. For me, it's the awareness piece, right? Like, if I can continue, personally, not for anyone else, this is me, is like everything. Like, one thing that there's a big realization for me, probably in the last 2.5 years, you mentioned it, is that everybody starts from different positions. And the fact that we've come through like this hard work society, that it's like we look at where people are and we don't necessarily take into where they started from. and then we expect that everybody should be able to do this thing.
Yeah.
It's a capitalistic society that kind of promotes that. But I think for me, it's like creating awareness for myself and getting the different perspectives almost helps me know where to look for education or from an education point, and then I can start to change my belief system around certain things, because my actions come, and the way I talk to people and the way I make decisions comes from my belief system. So for me, it's just like, I love to hear the perspective, and for our audience, I just think it's so important that the conversation just is being had. You know what I mean? Like, really important for people to understand this. It actually exists, you know, and it's if you think it doesn't, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just bullshit. So that's the reason I asked that question, is because I've been very lucky to interview some amazing women who have done it and are doing it. And I also know that there's women out there that aren't doing it, and it's probably because of this bullshit that we talk about. So, that's the reason I ask it. And I think that's something I try to do continuously, is educate myself. I've made mistakes in the past, definitely not saying I'm perfect, but I think the key is to learn, educate yourself, so you mentioned it, like what impact do you have moving forward?
Yeah. And acknowledging our bias for all of us, not necessarily in the situation where you as a man and myself as a woman, just all of us have bias that we, you know, whether it's conscious or unconscious, we bring that into the way that we interact with people in every aspect of our lives. And if we don't do work to acknowledge that, then, you know,
what are we even doing
well,
here?
the structures of society, as we know it, just continue, and the shit things that we don't want to live with anymore just continue. So, education and awareness is just key to being able to solve most of the world's problems. If only it was that simple.
Yeah, 100%. What's the most important trait that a founder must have for success?
Just being willing to know when you're wrong and to acknowledge what you don't know. If you think you know everything, you will fail. And I said that before. And if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're going to fail. You need to be willing to listen to the people that you employ and the people that you meet and learn from them. And it's the number one key to success.
Amazing. Couldn't put it better myself. Last one. So we mentioned before the ultimate diary for a founder. Do you use a diary?
In terms of like scheduling?
Just in general, like, you know, do you use a diary for yourself? It could be scheduling. I know some people like to journal. Is there stuff that you do?
I actually don't take the time to write things down anymore. I've gone in and out of phases a lot.
Yeah, so do I, yeah.
I take the time to think about things. A good physical solution would actually be very helpful. That I live and breathe by my Google Calendar. So that's my diary these days.
If you've seen mine, that's literally my life.
Yeah, people would have a nervous breakdown.
Family
if they
events,
looked at my
everything.
calendar. Yeah, you can see everything I'm doing if you subscribe to my calendar.
100%.
It's kind of creepy, actually. I think to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to have a really good way to structure your life. There needs to be an element that gives you flexibility, because you need to be able to jump on things as you want to. But structure is really key to help keeping you focused. And when you don't have a boss, there's no one there to create that structure for you. So you need a system that does that. And for a lot of people, that means scheduling out their day, writing down their to-do lists, and then spending time reflecting on what it is that they did or didn't achieve. So I asked myself a lot of questions, like, where were you today? Why didn't you get this done? Where were you this week? How did you spend your time? Where were you this month? Your goal was to get here and you spent all of it doing this other thing. How did you let that happen? These are the types of things that I ask myself. And every founder, or it doesn't even need to be a founder. Anyone who takes their work seriously and wants to do great things should be asking themselves those questions.
Amazing. Definitely. We're just trying to collect as much as we can right now.
Yeah.
That's it for today. I want to say a massive thank you to you. That was, I think, probably the most insightful conversation, if not, in the top 3 that I've had. So a lot of really great lessons there, not even just from a business perspective, just in general. And I know you're busy, and I know you're a mother, so I do really appreciate your time, and I know everybody would have enjoyed it.
Thank you. That's so lovely. it's always so, I find it overwhelming sometimes trying to surmise, 15 years worth of experience
course.
into a couple of minutes worth of an answer. So sorry, sometimes I sound like a space cadet. It's just me trying to pull all of the thoughts and the experience down from the ether into an actual verbal answer. But it's really, really lovely getting to talk about this stuff and to take a moment to stop and reflect on everything that we've done and the team have done, all the different people that have been part of the story along the way. So hopefully something that I said was helpful to someone.
No, it was great. It was honestly great. Thank you. To John, thanks for putting this together, my man. And to our listeners, again, I say this every week, but you guys are helping us do this and playing a big role in our ability to talk to lovely people like Jess and kind of share their journey and their story. So a massive thank you to you guys, and I really hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next week.